All right, let's dive into a really fascinating historical what if. What happens when you drop the absolute peak of modern warfare right into the middle of one of the most brutal battles of the 19th century? So here's the central question, and it is a wild one. Could a tiny modern fighting force, just 150 of them, actually stop an entire army from the past? I mean, on the surface, it sounds completely impossible. But the answer? It's way, way more complicated than you might think. So, let's set the scene. I want you to picture this. The year is 1863. We're at the pivotal Battle of Gettysburg. But instead of the Union Army holding the high ground on Cemetery Ridge, we have a single rifle company, about 150 modern United States Marines. A whole company against a massive army. Okay, first things first, we've got to set some ground rules to make this a real challenge. The Marines, they get all their standard gear, everything they can carry, but that is it. No calling in airstrikes, no choppers for evacuation, and this is the big one, absolutely no resupply. When their bullets and batteries are gone, they are completely and totally on their own. This whole scenario really hinges on a technology gap of over 150 years. The advantage the Marines have isn't just an edge. It's more like a massive, gaping chasm. Let's just start with the most obvious difference, lethality. A Civil War soldier, with a rifled musket, if he's lucky, he might hit a target at 300 yards. A modern Marine, they can effectively engage a target at over 800 meters. We're talking nearly half a mile. And what happens when the sun goes down? Well, the 1863 soldier is basically blind. But the Marine? The Marine owns the darkness with night vision and thermal optics. And it goes so far beyond just their rifles. We're talking about surveillance drones that can see the whole battlefield, encrypted radios for instant, perfect communication, and optics that can spot the body heat of a soldier hiding in the woods from a mile away. To an army from 1863, this tech wouldn't just be advanced, it would be completely indistinguishable from literal magic. But, and this is a huge but, the Marines have one single critical weakness. They are fighting against the clock. Every bullet they fire, every battery that gets drained, is a resource they can never, ever get back. This logistical clock is always ticking down, and it makes their incredible advantage a temporary one. So, how would they fight? Well, not with some massive frontal assault. No way. They'd start with something we can call the Ghost War. See, for a Civil War army, nighttime was for resting. For these Marines, it's prime time. It's when they go to work. And the strategy is just devastatingly simple. First, they use the drones to find the Confederate command structure. All they have to do is look for the biggest campfires. Then, small teams use suppressors and night vision to just slip past the sentries, completely undetected. Their target isn't the average soldier. No, it's the generals, the colonels, the very brains of the army. The strategic impact of this would be just immense. I mean, can you imagine? When generals just start disappearing from their tents in the dead of night, panic and confusion would spread like wildfire. Remember, in an era where the fastest message travels by horse, these kinds of decapitation strikes would completely paralyze the army's ability to coordinate, to fight back, to do anything. But let's say that doesn't completely work. What if the Confederates somehow managed to organize a mass assault anyway? Something like the famous Pickett's Charge. Well, that's when the Ghost War ends and the shock and awe phase begins. I want you to think about one number, 600. 600 rounds per minute. That is the rate of fire from a single M240 machine gun, and the Marines have several of them. The entire Confederate Army at Gettysburg couldn't get close to that kind of firepower. Just imagine you're a soldier in 1863. You're marching in formation, and suddenly, from half a mile away, a sound erupts that you can't even comprehend, a deafening, continuous roar. It's not the crack of individual muskets, it's something else. It would be terrifying on a deep, primal level. And the effect would just be catastrophic. Civil War tactics relied on packing men into these tight formations. Well, against machine guns, those formations become death traps. Entire lines of soldiers would be cut down in seconds. The psychological collapse would be almost instantaneous. The will to even move forward would just evaporate. But even this incredible, mind-bending firepower has a limit. If the Confederate Army doesn't break, if their commanders just keep sending waves and waves of men forward, the Marines are going to inevitably hit their logistical wall. It really all comes down to some brutal math. To beat a 70,000-strong army through pure attrition, every single one of those 150 Marines would have to take out 460 enemy soldiers. I mean, that is a staggering, almost impossible number, even with the best weapons in the world. A Marine might carry about 210 rounds. In a really heavy firefight, that can be gone in just a few minutes. Their technological superiority is directly, one-to-one, tied to their ammo supply. The moment that runs out, their advantage pretty much vanishes. And that is the sound that signals the end of their dominance. That simple, quiet click of a rifle trying to fire on an empty magazine. At that exact moment, a Marine with an empty M4 rifle is really just a man with a club, facing thousands of enemies with bayonets. So let's put it all together. What is the final verdict? Could they actually stop the Confederate Army at Gettysburg? Well, the key thing to understand is that victory for the Marines was never, ever about killing all 70,000 men. That's just not possible. Their real victory condition is psychological. They have to use that ghost war and the initial shock and awe to completely break the enemy's command structure and their will to fight. And they have to do it fast, probably within 48 hours, before that logistical clock finally runs out. And honestly, the most probable outcome is that they would succeed. An army from the 1860s facing these invisible night attacks, drones they can't see in the sky, weapons that literally sound like thunder. They wouldn't think they were fighting better soldiers. They'd think they were fighting demons or gods, and they would break and flee in absolute chaos. So to sum it all up, in the short term, the Marines would almost certainly pull off a stunning, unbelievable victory. They'd rout a force hundreds of times their size. But in the long term, without any resupply, they're doomed. They're just 150 guys with empty guns on an enemy continent. This whole thought experiment, it shows us that a small, modern force can absolutely rewrite the outcome of a single decisive battle just through pure technological and tactical superiority. But it also leaves us with a much bigger question, right? Winning one battle is one thing, but sustaining that victory, holding territory, and actually winning a war, well, that takes a lot more than advanced technology. It takes logistics, it takes numbers, and it takes a presence that 150 men, no matter how good they are, simply cannot provide.